Okay, so backstory. I go to a high school with about 500 people. This happened during my sophomore year. I'm a junior now. This might not be as extreme as some other Let's Not Meet posts, but this is something that still terrifies me even a year later. Mark had other issues before this happened. He started cutting his arms in class. I was sitting 2 seats away from him, and I watched the blood just roll down his arm. He ended up being reported to the office, and was sent to the YOC for about a month, if I'm right. The YOC is the Youth Opportunity Center, by the way. It's basically a mental hospital/juvie center for kids. When he came back, he seemed to be fine. He said he was never suicidal, that he only cut his arms for attention, which made sense for him because of his kind of messed up childhood. On the day that everything happened, I had no clue about anything, but during my 6th hour class, the school resource officer appeared at the door of the classroom. One of my friends was standing behind him. The SRO told my teacher that he needed to see me immediately. I had no clue what was going on. I just thought I was being randomly drug tested, as it's pretty common in my school. I tried asking him why we were going to the office, but I got no response. He took the 2 of us into the conference room, where 2 police officers were standing. They questioned me first. As I walked into the room, he shouldn't lock the door behind me. One of the officers blocked the door. The other blocked the window. I was petrified. I had no clue what was happening. This is the conversation that occurred. Note that the SRO was confrontational and aggressive throughout this entire conversation. Have you heard anything today? About what? There were threats made against our school. Your name came up in a conversation. What do you mean my name came up in a conversation? I haven't heard anything. Who made the threats? Who said I would know anything about it? Mark made the threats. When we questioned some other people, your name popped up. They said you might know something. Who said my name? We can't tell you. I understand that they probably couldn't tell me who said it due to confidentiality reasons, but it's so frustrating to be locked in a room with 3 police officers who are acting like you've done something wrong, especially when you haven't. To this day, I still have no clue who mentioned my name. I haven't heard anything. The only class I have with him is 5th period, and he wasn't even there today. We don't talk outside of that class. The only reason we talk in that class is because we sit at the same table. Are you sure? I'm positive. I don't know anything. All of this is news to me. Okay, you're free to go. They opened the door, took my friend in, and I walked off back to class. I was kind of in shock. As soon as I walked through my class door, everyone was suddenly bombarding me with questions about what had happened. I ignored them and put my head down for the rest of the class. Later that night, I saw on Facebook that the school had posted a message. I don't remember what it was exactly, due to it being deleted. From my recollection, it said something like this: Parents and students of school name. 2 students reported that another student had made threats against our school. We've handled the situation, and there's nothing to worry about. The actual post was longer, but I honestly don't remember it. I told my parents about everything that had happened that day, and they immediately wanted to know more information, of course. I couldn't give it to them, though. At that point, I didn't know about the hit list, or his arrest. All I know was that SG had threatened to shoot up the school. The next day, crap hit the fan. I found out he had told people about his plans during 1st hour, and he was taken out of class and arrested during 4th. He was going to do it during the 5th hour, and start with the class he was in, which I was in too, and then he would head off to the cafeteria. God, I still get chills when I think of this very moment. During lunch, my best friend came up to me and told me about this hit list Mark wrote, and showed her during the 1st hour. She didn't get the chance to tell me the day before. The other guy who was there confirmed everything. I was on the list. I was the 3rd name down. Evidently, he described in vivid detail how he would kill me. Luckily, someone stopped it from happening, or else I would be dead before I even got to graduate high school. Even to this day, I still don't know why he could have possibly wanted to kill me. I mean, I barely even spoke to this guy. I was polite in class if I had to work with him. We had no negative interactions, so I honestly have no clue what I did to make him so desperately want me dead. As I understand it, he did have a gun in his locker. It wasn't just some joke like his friends had thought. He really intended to do it. I was relieved that I was alive and that nothing had happened, but I was also out of my mind with horror at the thought of someone plotting my death. About 2 weeks later, my dad and I go into the Dollar General in our town. Keep in mind, my dad had no clue what Mark looked like. We walk in to buy something for dinner, and there I see Mark. He's staring at me so intensely that I wanted to immediately run out of the store, but I stuck close to my dad and just told him to hurry. He looked at me confused, and I told him that I would explain later. The whole time, Mark was following us around the store. I couldn't breathe. I don't have the words to describe how scared I was. My dad and I got what we needed, left the store, and got in the truck. As soon as I was in the truck and the doors were locked, my dad turned to me and asked, "Who was that? He looked like he wanted to see you dead." At that point, I replied it was Mark. At this point, we were both thoroughly panicked, not only because he was roaming free, because he knew where I lived. We had security cameras, but knowing that person who has adamantly expressed his desire to kill you knows where you live is terrifying. The school, for its part, has since acted like this incident never happened. In fact, one of the administrators told me and my family we were overreacting when we wanted to know if he'd be back at school. According to them, I was never in any real danger. Luckily, the kid is no longer at my school. He's currently off in some type of jail because, get this, he murdered his mother. He pushed her down the stairs, and she was found dead in a body bag. Thankfully, he was caught, and I don't think he's going to get out anytime soon. This might be a bit long, but it's worth it. I apologize in advance for the format, since I'm on mobile. This older man has lived in a corner basement unit in my girlfriend's apartment complex for many years. I noticed when we walked down to the basement hall to go do laundry that I could always hear this loud music coming from his apartment. It was loud, but not enough that you'd hear it in your own place. He also always had sheets covering his windows, even on the nicest sunny days. We would always make jokes that he played loud music 24/7 because he probably had a hostage in there. Fast forward up until last week. We had just gotten back from getting some groceries when we noticed cop cars surrounding the outside of the apartment, a dead body being brought out, and him outside. A good friend lives in the unit across from him and could hear everything going on and what the cops were saying, so she filled us in on the info she could get. It turns out he had called about his girlfriend dying of COVID-19. They came over to get the body and asked questions. He had supposedly moved the body from the bedroom to the living room and kept changing the time she had died. He would say this morning or also last night, but when the cops looked, they said it looked like the body had been there for at least a few days. We speculate that he called when it started to smell and used COVID as an excuse so they would stay out of the apartment as much as they could. He also apparently lied about her name multiple times, and they couldn't find any ID on her. She was so severely malnourished and had bed sores all over her body so bad, the cops said she probably couldn't even have walked. The cop who was on the scene saw a lot of unmarked pill bottles and decided to take a look around when he found a 13-year-old girl hiding in the bedroom. She was completely mute, malnourished, and missing huge chunks of her hair. He never mentioned the little girl, even went as far as to tell them nobody else was in the house. Let me make it known this is a small one-bedroom apartment. He never even told the landlord he had 2 people living with him. My girlfriend had also never heard or seen these people. The cops said there was no type of ID or birth certificate for the little girl, and the apartment was completely riddled with black mold. No edible food anywhere. They also found several guns. This man turns out to be in his early 60s, and the woman who died was 30. It turns out he never got arrested, for God knows why. I'm sure they're building a case against him. The girl got taken away. We called the landlord the next day to see if she knew what was going on, and she said she was evicting him and he would be gone in a few weeks. Over this period, the music has stopped, and we've seen him taking out a large cage to the dumpster. He also told the landlord the woman died of natural causes, and that COVID wasn't even involved. We talked to a woman who lived in the unit above him, and she said she had actually called the police multiple times on him. For months, she had kept hearing a muffled someone screaming for help. The cops clearly had done nothing, but he must have known she had said something, because after she had called, he left shit in front of her apartment door. He would scream at her and call her nasty words whenever he saw her around. It's all speculation as to what happened in that apartment, but it's very clear there was some foul play. We've even guessed that he didn't live there full time, and would just hold them there and come whenever he wanted to get off or abuse them in some way. I've seen the man once in passing, but I've never spoken to him. I may have been 8 or 9 years old at the time. I lived in a nice little middle-class neighborhood. One of my best friends, Raven, lived across the street diagonally, one house down, so I often spent evenings at her home after school. Raven's mom would always call my mom to let her know I was leaving and to expect me in the next minute or so. This way, my mom knew when to unlock our front door. Often, she would stand and watch from the screen door just to make sure I got across okay. I had begun noticing this beat-up red car, possibly an old VW or Buick, that would pass by almost every night as I ran back across the street. I would always head home just after dark, so possibly around 8:30 anytime I was leaving Raven's house. It would always roll by super slow, and the speed limit was 25 miles per hour, and I want to say this vehicle always passed at maybe half of that. One night as I was leaving, perhaps a bit later than usual, I stepped out of the side door of Raven's house just as the car was about to pass the house completely. It stopped in the road and backed up as I approached the side. The window rolled down just as the car stopped in front of me. A little woman with short reddish-brown hair and blue-framed glasses was smiling sweetly at me. "Hi, sweetheart. It's a little late for you to be out right now, isn't it?" she asked me. Her voice was low and pleasant. "No, Mom lets me. I'm just walking home," I said stupidly. "Oh gosh, how silly of your mom. There's all kinds of bad people out late at night. Where do you live, sugar? I'll give you a ride." Just then, my mom came bursting out of our front door and screamed, "Leave her alone!" as she began running to me. The woman's pleasant demeanor dropped, and I heard her mutter a word, "Fuck," as she slammed her foot on the gas and took off at well over the speed limit. She didn't stop at the nearby stop sign and just blasted through it to make her escape. I got a nice lecture that night, but also a lot of tight hugs. My mom was super glad that she had chosen to look out the storm door to check on me, instead of just letting me wander around alone. I could have been taken, and she told me as much. I can't remember if the police were called, but I remember I never interacted with any officers. It doesn't end here, though. Like most little kids, I really liked setting up lemonade stands. Unlike most little kids, I also enjoyed hand-making and baking cakes and brownies and cookies, also selling those at my little stands. About 2 weeks after the prior incident, a beautiful sunny Saturday, Mom helped me with the baking and helped me make lemonade and set me up with the front yard with my sign. She had been paranoid ever since the prior incident and hardly ever let me out of her sight aside from school and the bus, and this was no different. She stayed outside with me, all while I sold my little treats to passerby, until she had to run to the restroom. It would obviously be a pain to take everything down and bring it inside while she went, and then bring it all back out and set it up again. She figured I'd be okay for a few minutes, considering it was the middle of the afternoon, and usually predators aren't that stupid. Mom left me alone for several minutes while she went to the bathroom, and presumably went to grab a snack, as she was gone for about 10 or so minutes. A familiar face walked up about 8 minutes in. She appeared from around some bushes right down the street. I didn't see her in the distance walking up. I honestly saw her stand up from behind the bushes and brush herself off and begin walking towards me. Her clothes were smart and sophisticated looking, almost like a pantsuit. It was a real clash with how ratty her car had been, but that same placating smile was on her face, and her eyes glinted behind the same glasses. "Aw, cute. A lemonade stand. Hi again, sweetie. Sorry for bothering you the other night. I didn't realize how close to home you were. Mom told me not to talk to you. Go away." I said it as meanly as I could muster, but Mom had rightfully made me so frightened of this woman, I'm sure I sounded just like the scared little girl I was. "Come on now, Mary." She spoke my real name, first and last, and my eyes got big. "I'm a friend of your parents. I live down the street, remember? We met at the pool this last summer." I had no recollection of her. "If you're their friend, why did you leave so quick?" "Mom!" I began shouting for my mother. This made her crouch down in front of my table, eye to eye with me. "We don't need to do that. I just want to talk to you. You like to bake, right? I have a really fancy kitchen with a nice baker's oven. All sorts of cool gadgets to make baking cupcakes and stuff like this super fun." I stood up and pushed the table into this woman and started running for the front door. The woman kicked the folding table away and started to chase me until my mom appeared in the doorway. She flung the door open, and I barreled into her. The woman stopped running and stood still in the yard. "What are you doing to my daughter?" my mom shouted at her. "My God, your child is so rude. I was just trying to buy a cupcake and she shoved the table into me and ran. Now I have lemonade all over my clothes." The woman lied through her teeth. I don't think she was expecting my mom to come back. "That's the lady from that night, in the car." I was now trying to get around my mom and hide behind her. My mom pulled out her cell phone, and this time I know for sure she called the police. The woman immediately ran off back the direction she came. The cops appeared. One took statements while the other patrolled the neighborhood searching for her. They ended up finding her car parked at the grocery store that was up the road about half a mile, at the other end of the neighborhood. They waited for her to show up and claim it, but she never did. They never could find her. When I was about 8 or 9, my family took a trip skiing to a small resort, a couple of hours from when we lived in Spain. The resort itself was a sleepy little town of about 400 to 500 people max, with a few small supermarkets and hotels. Not much else around, really. Typically, we picked the worst time possible to embark on the trip, which we had been planning for a good few years. The night after we arrived there was a blizzard, so we spent the first half of the week locked inside the hotel. Although we were able to go outside for the remaining few days, we had little to do given that the slopes were shut down. The story that I want to tell comes from those first few days locked down in the hotel. Despite my parents' annoyance at the timing of the trip being a nightmare, myself and my sister, who was 11 months older, were having a pretty fantastic time. Locked up in the mountains with nothing to do, we were able to just spend our days running around the hotel, eating sweets and watching TV in the lobby. I should probably mention at this point that the hotel was a bit of a maze. The large bar/restaurant area where my parents sat each day reading was at the center of the hotel. A myriad of smaller rooms then connected to the bar area at random points, shooting off in different directions. These rooms often had no discernible function. Each one had the same mahogany interior, and they were full of couches, fireplaces, and antiques that allowed for great games of hide-and-seek. The rooms would often have offshoots themselves, connecting off to more rooms which would then connect to even more useless wooden caves. As such, it was possible to be 4 or 5 rooms away from the main hotel area at any one time, without knowing exactly where you were or how to get back. Anyway, at some point along the weekend, myself and my sister decided to play some hide-and-seek. Bearing in mind the above, it was an almost impossible challenge to find the hider, especially if they moved around. To this day, I'm certain my sister was a filthy little cheat. At one point in the game, I was just about to give up searching for my sister until I heard her voice from what sounded like a few rooms away. After successfully navigating the web of rooms, I emerged to find her sitting on a couch alongside a German man with gray hair, probably in his 60s if I had to guess. As soon as I emerged into the room, the man turned to me and told me he was taking my sister to the swimming pool and asked if I wanted to come. I remembered immediately thinking it was odd that there was a swimming pool that we hadn't heard of. My parents had been complaining that morning about how much TV we were watching, and I was sure they would have taken us there if they had known about it. Besides, the hotel did not seem to be of the size to be able to host one. I relayed to the man that I'd have to go ask my parents first, and told my sister to come back with me to find them. He immediately replied that I should go, and that he was going to take my sister on ahead. I told my sister that she absolutely had to come with me, but excited at the thought of the swimming pool, she said she didn't want to. We began to argue with each other, with the man taking my sister's side and encouraging me to go ask my parents' permission, whilst he waited with my sister. I dug my foot in, telling my sister that our parents would be very cross if we went somewhere on our own. After a few minutes of bickering, she eventually gave in and came back with me, giving her assurance to the man that we'd come back. Of course, when we told our parents, they were completely livid. Dad went back to the room to try and find the man, but with all the offshoots and random branches, and given that all the random rooms looked the same, it was impossible to be sure that he was in the right one. In any case, there was no sign of the man anymore. I remember my dad screaming at the hotel lobby that he needed a list of all the male guests and the room numbers. Of course, they wouldn't give it to him. We spent the rest of the trip by our parents' side, terrified of the thought of being locked up in a blizzard with this man. Thankfully, we never saw him again. But the scary thing? We checked with the lobby, and as we'd imagined, the hotel did not have a swimming pool.